Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we're joined by Dr. Vincent Pedre, and we're talking about the gut as the gateway to excellent wellness. Dr. Pedre's new book, the GUTSMART Protocol, is the culmination of years of research and clinical experience as a functional gut health expert. Our conversation dives deep into the importance of gut health, including why we've become compromised and what we can do to support health and healing by focusing on the gut. Dr. Pedre, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
I am, as I already said, so excited for this conversation. And I want to start by finding out how you became so passionate about gut health.
You know, it's the path to becoming a gut health expert is something that was under my nose my entire life, and partly I didn't realize it because irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, had become part of my normal, and all of the associated symptoms that I call gut-related symptoms were also kind of part of the makeup, my matrix of being. That after a while, and I'm sure that people listening to this can relate to this, is when you have symptoms that have been chronic and they've been going on for years since you were a child, you start thinking that that's just part of who you are, that there's no other normal other than that. So it becomes your quote unquote normal. But I remember all the way back to when I was very young and suffered from severe constipation to the point I was in so much pain, like crying late at night, trying to go to the bathroom, and I couldn't. And that at some point turned into more like upset stomachs, butterflies in the stomach. And what interlays over that time is that I would get sick, like any child gets sick. And my parents would take me to the pediatrician, and they would prescribe an antibiotic. And they would prescribe an antibiotic pretty much every single time, regardless of the fact that it was probably just a viral infection.
Sure.
Now, my immune system was weak, and we know that 80% of the immune system lives all along the gut lining. And if your gut is compromised because your gut microbiome has been altered by antibiotics, then your immune system is going to be on hyper alert. And so my immune system was on hyper alert, couldn't fight off infections easily. And at times they actually had to take me to a clinic to get a gamma globulin shot, which is something that I don't even think we do anymore. But it's basically pooled immunoglobulins from blood donors. And every time I got that, and the reason that I was taken to a doctor to do that is because the antibiotics weren't even helping.
Sure.
And I wasn't getting better. And I always felt better. It was like getting a surrogate immune system because my own immune system wasn't working. And this went on for pretty much all my teenage years. I was on 20 plus rounds of antibiotics, probably 2 or 3 times per year. And as a result, and I can only say this looking back in time.
Sure. After
I trained in functional medicine, even after I was a doctor, I didn't even learn this in medical school. But looking back in time, by my early to mid 30s, when I was discovered functional medicine and started kind of going down
that rabbit hole,
the rabbit hole
we live in.
Yeah, the gut microbiome and gut health and leaky gut, all these things that just, leaky gut at the time, it wasn't something that Western medicine even accepted as a possibility. And so I went down that rabbit hole and realized that the 20 plus rounds of antibiotics had destroyed my gut microbiome. And as a result, I had developed leaky gut. And because of the leaky gut, I had developed sensitivities to the two top food groups in a teenager's diet, which were wheat, gluten, and dairy. And I was eating, frosted flakes, frosted mini wheats for breakfast with
Mac and
milk,
cheese.
Fruit Loops. I was having mac and cheese. I was having sandwiches with cheese for lunch. So I was poisoning myself. My mom would take me to get a vanilla milkshake at Burger King on the way home from school every single day.
And we're not parent bashing. They just did what they knew.
I mean,
but I grew up very similar to you.
we didn't know any better, and obviously the pediatricians didn't know either, because no pediatrician ever said, "Hey, let's take dairy out of his diet because he keeps getting airway infections."
Right.
And it wasn't until, I did grow up in a household that was my dad was very curious and focused on learning about nutrition and supplementation.
Wow.
Granted, the knowledge that we could get in those days was based on what you could get from the bookstore, from the library, like a book that you check out, but you couldn't go online and hear about other people's, sometimes you heard word of mouth. So my dad went and had food sensitivity testing done. And I remember at one point he couldn't eat all these foods, and we thought it was ridiculous as kids. Like, oh my God, like can't eat this whole list of foods. But it was ingrained in my thoughts, even though as a kid you kind of reject that. So by the time I went to medical school, I was really trying to biohack, like, how can I not get sick? I don't want to be on antibiotics all the time. And I was very observant of my diet and changes. And when I went to medical school, my diet took a turn that partly was accidental, because I couldn't sit and eat cereal with milk for breakfast because I had to just run out the door to get to my 8 a.m. classes. So I cut out a lot of milk from the diet. And coincidentally, at the same time, I was cooking for myself. So I started adding olive oil, avocado. I started eating more healthy fats. So without even knowing it, I was making some really important changes in the diet. And that first fall semester in medical school, I noticed that I wasn't getting sick the way I used to. And I wasn't picking up other people's colds so easily. And that was my first, like, wow, there must be something here, but you still are not making the full connections, because I wasn't being taught in medical school that dairy is inflammatory and that can actually increase mucus production and increase your risk for picking up viruses and colds. So it wasn't like 100% withdrawal. I didn't understand how important it was at the time, but it was definitely part of my education. Was all this self-experimentation that I was doing, trying to figure out, like, how do I feel better? I didn't fully understand that it had to do with my gut and the gut microbiome until years later, over a decade later, when I started reading about functional medicine and Dr. Mark Hyman's books, and finally decided, okay, I need to do this. I need to restore my gut microbiome. I've got to change my diet. We've got to eat organic. We've got to be really selective about the types of meats that we cook at home. And I went through a big diet overhaul around that time, and my gut health started improving. And it was a big surprise, because going back to what I said at the very beginning, I had thought that this was my normal, and that I was basically, by the time I discovered functional medicine, I had been through my residency training where they would feed us pizza and Coke for lunch. And, you're raiding the vending machine at 3 a.m. because you're starving and you're up all night and you're eating, like, M&Ms and horrible things. And I was always running to the bathroom, like, and I didn't know what was upsetting my my digestion. I had no clue. I wasn't making the connection. And by the time I discovered functional medicine, I thought, this is just the way I'm going to have to live for the rest of my life. I might be out at a restaurant and something might not sit right. And in the moment, I might have to run to the bathroom. I'm sure people who are listening to this probably thinking like, that's me. Like that's happened to me.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that when that's your experience, that's your normal, right? Like this is, you just think like, this is how I'm made.
And because I had lived that way at that point for over 2 decades of my life, I thought that was going to be my normal for the rest of my life. And it was quite a surprise that the changes, the improvements happened really fast. Once I actually figured out through a blood test, because I'm still a scientist, Western trained, so I'm
like the data.
I really like data, and I felt like cutting out gluten was this insurmountable mountain. It just felt like a really big task. So if I was going to do it, I wanted to have a real, like, solid reason to do it. And it showed up in my blood test and I lit up.
Yes.
and I do that with patients sometimes because I think that sometimes you need that extra motivation.
I agree.
To know that gluten is toxic to your body. And when you can see it on paper, then it's that extra motivation to then create. I mean, I was eating sandwiches, I was eating pizza, bread was a part of my diet. And from 1 week to the next, I did a complete overhaul and one of the most challenging things, it took probably like a month or more, was to reprogram in my head what I thought was an acceptable lunch, because now I couldn't have pizza, I couldn't have sandwich. So like running out in the middle of the day and getting those things, I had to change where I sourced my food, because now it was going to be more like a rice bowl with vegetables and healthy things, or it was going to be a salad, but no bread, no gluten, and no dairy, among some other foods that I had to eliminate that came up on the test. And sure, there were probably some hiccups initially, but within 2 weeks, I started feeling so different.
Hey, that's amazing.
And my energy levels came up, my mental clarity, my focus. So a lot of things that I write about in my upcoming book, the GUTSMART Protocol, about how the gut affects so many other systems in the body that you may or may not realize, because they have also, those symptoms have become part of your normal, or you think that they're because you're just getting older, and that's a normal process of aging.
And it's inflammation, and it's coming from the gut. I love that you said that. It's one of the things I think your story, my story, that you had a lot of gut symptoms. A lot of people have food sensitivities and don't have gut symptoms. And so they think, oh, my gut's fine. And I'm like, well, but if you have autoimmunity, you have leaky gut. Like there's no question unless you've already done the work. And they're always shocked that it's like, oh, my headaches or brain fog, mood, anxiety. I mean, so many other things are affected.
I had a lot of energy issues by the time I finished my training as a doctor. And I thought that those energy issues and the severe fatigue were adrenal fatigue at the time, which was kind of the in diagnosis. And I thought it was because I was just wiped out from my training.
Sure.
But I was also wiped out from eating a lot of gluten and having leaky gut and being inflamed.
Yeah, which is incredible. And it's always fascinating to me. I actually just had this conversation with a veterinarian, equine veterinarian yesterday. Like, why are we trying to kill people who want to be doctors? Just the everything you go through in medical school. You're the first person I've ever heard say, I accidentally started eating closer to what supports me during medical school. Just for you, it was time restraints, thank goodness. But usually it's, I started medical school and things went downhill fast. So Oh, so
The other thing that I did at the time, which I think also influenced how I felt, and I talk about in my book, was I started meditating.
ah, love it.
And I was
Yep.
doing breath work and meditation I had started learning it about 8 months before I got into medical school or started medical school, and I continued it throughout medical school, and incorporated yoga as well. And I think those things also made a big difference because you can't out diet a stressed out lifestyle.
And I love that you brought that up because, when we're trying to heal the gut, if you're not getting yourself into that parasympathetic state, you can't heal. And I see that all the time. I have had people come in that have their diet actually dialed in, but their stress is still through the roof and they're not managing it. Versus, it's very rare that somebody shows up. I have one client who has a really good practice, does all the things, meditation, breathwork, yoga. So I love that you brought that in. We have so many parallels, and listeners know my story. It's always so fascinating, the things that improve, and even the way you connected the dots. Like when I started, for me, diet and meditation were the two things that really moved my healing from RA, and increasing my healthy fats was such a big piece growing up low fat. So I love that part. I want to dig in a little bit.
And corn oil in my house growing up, we cooked almost everything with Mazola corn oil,
yes,
which we know is an inflammatory omega-6 oil.
Well, and my family was in the dairy business, which I now know I don't do, is inflammatory for me. But just to add insult to injury, we used squeezed parquet margarine at the table instead of butter, because it was supposed to be so healthy. So luckily we know better now. And I remember when I first started to get into functional medicine, I kind of thought the whole gut health thing, it all starts in the gut, was just, again, like the buzzword and this is overdone. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to have conversations about gut health. So tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, the GUTSMART Protocol.
I think it's revolutionary in a sense that it's one of the first personalized books for gut healing that's based on a quiz that I designed. And the quiz covers not just gut symptoms, but also gut-related health issues that might happen in other parts of your body because, as you know, when you have gut imbalances, that's going to affect every system in the body, the skin, the lungs, the airway, the brain, your mental health. Everything is affected by your gut and how you're absorbing nutrients, and whether there's leaky gut, weight gain, metabolism, your joint health, so many things.
All of it. Really, all of it.
And like you said, over the years, I had patients who presented with gut-related symptoms, but had absolutely no gut health issues and swore that their gut was fine. They were having normal bowel movements. And lo and behold, when you test their gut, I would find yeast overgrowth, parasites, all sorts of inflammatory markers. So sometimes the person is maybe not aware, or maybe the symptoms aren't strong enough to
we normalize
create awareness.
Like people that say, I poop regularly. Well, give me details. Tell me more. Oh, twice a week. I'm like, no, that's not. That's normal. You might think that's normal for you, but that's not good.
There's a lot of it's the importance of not making assumptions and understanding that everybody might use similar language, but the language might mean different things to different people.
Totally.
So always asking people, what is it that they mean by that? But part of the reason that I wanted to create a personalized program is that I learned from taking care of people with gut health issues is that there really no two guts are the same. So saying that there is a one size fits all diet that will
Mm,
fix all gut issues
thank
is
you. Say
not
that
right.
again.
There's
Yeah.
no one size fits all, because if what I found, if you have severe gut issues by my quiz and you classify as severe, you can't have fermented foods. They're not going to agree with you.
Right.
And they
Yet
actually
they're
can
so
make
healthy
you,
for some people.
yeah, but they can make you feel sicker. Although, you probably, read a lot of articles about how great fermented foods are. And what I wanted to capture in my book is all the caveats, and to help people navigate through the confusion of what is it that you eat and what is it that you don't eat, especially if you're trying to heal your gut, but also revitalize your whole body. And and so, there is a very strong part talking about the science behind it, really trying to educate people, because I think knowledge is power. And the more you understand, the
Yes.
easier it is to commit to making the changes that are going to improve your health. And then I teamed up with a chef who's written a lot of cookbooks in Australia. And she helped create recipes that were classified according to mild, moderate, or severe for people who are in all the different categories. Obviously, someone who tests mild can eat moderate and severe recipes. So
Right.
as you go down in the categories, you can eat the category before you. And then we have a very strong component of mind body, and talking
Love
about the
that.
vagus nerve and the gut brain connection and how important that is for improving gut health, including teaming up with some breathwork and meditation teachers to create some great breathwork and meditations for gut health, including like a pre-meal ritual that you would do
Yes.
right before you eat, during a mindful eating ritual, and a post-meal ritual
Love
as
it.
well. So I really wanted to kind of address the gut from the way I think of it, as the gut body mind spirit connection. And and like you said, getting people into the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest and assimilation state, which is also the place where the body feels safe. And
Right.
when your body feels safe, your body can heal.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so excited for the book, because it's you it's so comprehensive. And this is for we hear the word holistic a lot. This is actually what holistic means, right? Is our whole body. And so again, like just saying, here's the diet you should be eating, it's not enough to heal. Are
It's never
there
been enough, and it's been so influenced by my own experiences, like discovering breathwork and meditation before I went to medical school,
yes.
and yoga as well, and just realizing how important it was to incorporate all those pieces as part of a healing plan. And it's interesting because over the years, you thought that, okay, it's this thing that you do that's you diet and supplements and all that, that's kind of like the main thing, and then maybe you add in meditation, breath
Right.
work.
Right.
Now
If
I
you're an
think
overachiever, no, that's
all
not it.
all of it
Yes.
is front and center. And I really do believe that um, if you can't get into a healing mindset, it doesn't matter what you'll do physically for the body. You're not going to be able to heal fully.
Oh, I love that. It's so essential. And again, that was another thing through my journey of I used to like, oh, we'll handle this and then we'll get to healing mindset. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm
Yeah.
doing it backwards. We have to
Usually,
start
like,
there and get better results.
and over the years, that's how people usually approach their healing journey. I would tell them all the things I wanted them to do and add on the meditation, the mindset. And when they would come back for their follow-up, they would tell me, well, I started doing the diet, but no, I haven't started
Yeah.
meditating. I haven't. And it was almost like they saw it as this adjunct that was just like marked optional.
Right.
And
Right.
and it's actually, I think it's part
Essential.
of self-care that is non-optional.
Yeah. And the results you get from making the other changes are exponentially faster. So I just look at it as, again, that's where we start now. I love that. You mentioned there's so many things I want to talk to you about. We're going to briefly touch on bloating because I think that even people, and so many people who experience bloating will tell you they don't have gut symptoms. I feel like that's one of the ones. When you're running for the bathroom with diarrhea, you tend to acknowledge you've got that. But again, people think, well, I've always been that way. That's just how it is. So what causes bloating?
So many things can filter down and cause bloating from imbalances in your gut microbiome. So something we call a dysbiosis, which is just really a fancy word for an imbalanced gut microbiome where maybe you've lost some of the good probiotic bacteria and you've got overgrowth of some bad bugs, which could be bacteria, could be yeast, could be parasites. So those things can cause bloating in and of themselves. Other things that can cause bloating include foods, whether it's a food intolerance like lactose intolerance, an intolerance to FODMAPs like fructans. And a lot of times that's related to a condition called SIBO or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, which is not necessarily bad bacteria. It's just bacteria that have translocated and are hanging out in your small intestine, whereas they should be in the large intestine. But now they're hanging out in the small intestine where they're going to encounter food earlier before your body gets a chance to digest and absorb it. And then that leads to a lot of fermentation and gas production, which leads to bloating, which can also, so that relates to possibly a more upstream problem. And by upstream, I mean upstream in the GI tract. It could be low stomach acid that's causing bloating. And a typical way to know if you have low stomach acid, maybe low protease's ability to break down protein, is you get full immediately after eating. You might start burping. So if you start burping, that's a sign of low stomach acid. And food feels like it doesn't empty from your stomach. It just kind of sits there. And your stomach expands after you eat. 30 minutes later, it still feels like it's sitting there. So that could be an upstream problem, not enough stomach acid. That can exist in conjunction with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You might have another thing that's very common is pancreatic insufficiency, where your pancreas is not secreting enough enzyme. But what you might think that if you have pancreatic insufficiency, that it's the pancreas that's the problem. Usually it's not the pancreas. The pancreas is fine. It's the small intestine brush border that's not signaling the pancreas to secrete those enzymes because that brush border is inflamed. The gut is leaky. And so leaky gut itself can cause bloating. Food sensitivities, so having an immune reaction to foods like wheat, gluten for me, for a lot of people, or other foods. It could be a wide variety of foods that could lead to this, can cause bloating. And another one that often is missed is a condition called small intestinal fungal overgrowth, SIFO, which a lot of people know as candida, but doesn't necessarily have to be candida yeast. Could be another type of yeast that's fermenting and producing gas and causing bloated feeling. And surprisingly, people may think that this is not a cause for bloating, but if you're constipated, it's kind of like having a clogged pipe and it's going to back up. And if things aren't emptying while you're adding more stuff to your intestines because you keep eating, even if you're not hungry and you're severely constipated, well, when you eat, you're going to get bloated and that bloating may last all day. And then you can kind of filter down in all the different causes for constipation, like methane predominant SIBO. They can be low vagal tone, which is really important.
Or even you mentioned low stomach acid. I mean, it's all connected. Yeah. There are things that signal motility.
So, and a lot of times there's not one singular cause for bloating. A lot of times it's interconnected. There could be also, if your gallbladder was taken out because you had cholecystitis, then you're not getting that bolus of bile in the gut, which is also
Right.
really important for controlling the microbial environment in the gut and helping to push stool through. It could be as simple as you're not eating enough fiber. So
Right.
things are getting backed up.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of potential causes of what might feel like the same thing for a lot of people. They just get bloated, their pants expand, they've got to loosen the button, but it's not one thing. It could be a whole combination of things or different things for different people that could be causing those symptoms.
And I love that you mentioned the button, because I was going to circle back to that. Like, if you have to loosen your belt or open your pants, that's a sign. Like, that is not how our body is designed to work when we eat. We shouldn't need to change our clothing.
No, the
These are
normal way,
signals.
yeah, the normal way to feel is within 30 minutes of eating, your food is digesting, your stomach's starting to empty, and actually that full feeling that you had when you finished eating dinner is starting to dissipate.
Yeah.
And by an hour after eating dinner, you should feel like your digestive system is quiet, feels good, it's relaxed.
I always
That's how
say,
you
if
should
you
feel.
can feel it, that's a symptom. Like, we shouldn't actually feel our food from the time we eat it to the time it leaves. I don't think. Like, it should just be doing its thing. And just like joint pain, brain fog, you name any other symptom, this all these gut symptoms are information, even if you've had them your whole life, like you did, like I did. It was your body trying to tell you, like, hey.
And a lot of times what I feel, and part of what I talk about in the book, the GUTSMART Protocol, is developing intuitive eating. And I divided it into three parts: before meal intuition, which relates to kind of like tuning in and seeing, well, how hungry are you? Are you really hungry? And is there something that you're craving? Because there's an intelligence in your body that might be saying, I really want some greens right now, or I need red meat right now. Could be
Right.
that you need meat because your body needs iron. And listening to that intuition, and then during meal intuition is really about recognizing and slowing down and being mindful and present to get the signals when your body is full, when you can stop eating. And post meal intuition, very important for people to develop, which I feel is like the part that you and I as practitioners are always kind of acting as a surrogate
Yes.
in intuitive voice, where
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of like body whispers, helping people to understand the signals that their bodies are telling them. But ultimately, we want our patients, or people out there who read the book, to become their own
Yes.
intuitive healers by learning to listen to the signals from their body. And post meal intuition is about recognizing, how did this meal sit?
Yes.
Not just how is it digesting, but did you feel really tired after eating? Did you feel like you
Yes.
had to take a nap? Did you get a headache? Did your eyes get heavy? Did you get like some sinus pressure? Did your joints get achy? Did you get itchy? Did your skin get itchy? Because all of these are signs that maybe there's something that you ate that isn't quite agreeing with your physiology. But a lot of people, like you said, they ignore these signals because their awareness isn't there. And I think it's really important to develop these three types of intuition
I
in
love
relation to
that.
eating.
Because especially, I love that you included the post, because we do, like, we ate, we're done, you know, we don't think about it ever again. And using your intuition can allow you to then become the detective. Like you said, this is what you and I do all the time with people. So it's like, okay, if this meal, I did notice this meal, I wanted a nap after I ate lunch yesterday. What
Yeah.
was in then you go through and you can start to really identify. You talked about knowledge is power, and that's another way. We don't always need a test. I love testing. I believe in it, and I think it encourages people to stay on track.
Yeah.
But
I think we
how
learn a
you
lot
feel is
I
the
think just by being really keen observers, we can learn a lot. And as you know, not every functional test is perfectly black and white, doesn't always
Sure.
read everything.
Yeah.
And that's why, we don't treat the test, we treat the patient.
Ah, I love that. Absolutely. And if you look at my labs, I don't have celiac markers. I don't seem to have any gluten sensitivity that shows up. That's because I haven't eaten gluten in 15 years. So, and I never had the genetic markers. So
And
labs,
those are only a certain limited set of markers. There are probably
sure,
other pathways
we
that are
don't know
unique
yet.
to
Yeah.
people. And that's why, yeah, going back to the importance of this intuition, and I actually use it for also planning a meal by thinking about how do I want to feel after I eat. Because maybe I want to feel light. I don't want to feel too heavy. Or maybe I'm really hungry and I want to have a heavier meal. I'm just going to relax at home. I'm not going to do anything major. Or what if you're planning to go out dancing afterwards? You're not going to want to have a big pasta dinner that's going to weigh you down, right? You're going to
Yeah.
want to have something that lets you
Or
feel light and move.
giving a presentation, and if there's a food that include sometimes, and it maybe leads to a little brain fog or tiredness, or that's not, you don't do that before you get on stage. Like, that's where that power comes in. I This could take us like way down a rabbit hole, but I have to ask you, are there certain foods that you think nobody should be eating, or is there a starting point? Obviously the quiz and the book.
Yeah, the quiz is gonna filter down and at least give you where you land, what's slot, mild, moderate, or severe. And based on that, I created an exhaustive food list with consulting with nutritionists and fermentationists to really filter down what foods are okay in each of the categories. But there are some general guidelines, right? Some things that we know that are good for everyone. For example, when you can buy organic, avoid pesticides, right? Because pesticides are like antimicrobials. They go in and they mess up your gut microbiome. For a lot of people, a good starting point is taking gluten out because gluten affects the permeability of the gut, or in other words, increases gut permeability or causes leaky gut. For people even who are normal, quote unquote normal, who shouldn't react to gluten, might have some mild issues with gluten. And sometimes you don't know unless you do an elimination and then a reintroduction. Because when you're getting overexposed to a food, a lot of times the signals get all
Yep.
crossed and jammed.
I'm old
And
enough to remember the fuzzy TV screen that younger people are like, I don't know what you're talking. That's how I think of it, though. Why doing an elimination diet with a proper reintroduction is so key to
it's
learning.
is really helpful. I mean, the other fact is that the majority of the world is 70 to 90% of people in the world are lactose intolerant. So taking dairy out of the diet, and that's just the tip of the iceberg because a lot of people are also dairy sensitive. It's one of among the top food sensitivities out there. Some things might be surprising and are more individualized. Like some people don't do well with eggs, for
Right.
example.
Yep.
But that's not something that's for everyone. Across the board, I'm going to say sugar is bad, right?
Right.
Sugar is inflammatory. You're not going to go wrong if you can reduce your sugar intake. You're also not going to go wrong if you cut out or you limit your alcohol intake, because alcohol is also a gut disruptor and it actually increases inflammatory signals in the body. And the older you get, you probably, like anybody who's listening, probably thinking, I can't drink the way I used to when I was in my 20s, 30s. Like one drink just hits me harder. I don't recover as easily the next day, or if I've got a couple of drinks. Well, it's causing more damage than just your ability to recover the next day. And it actually also is increasing your risk for cancer.
Mm.
So across the board, limiting alcohol if you can, or if you're in the process of healing because you've got inflammation, you've got autoimmunity, then you really want to take away the obstacles to healing.
Sure.
And that includes those things. You also have to be really careful with health foods, things that
Quote,
have,
quote unquote, health foods.
that are branded to look
Yes.
healthy. For example, there's a lot of bars and foods out there that are using sugar alcohols as substitutes for regular sugar. The sugar alcohols feed certain parts of the microbiome. And after you eat that, you might end up so bloated that you feel sick.
Yes.
It can also cause diarrhea. So like
Yep.
erythritol.
And some of these packages have a warning, like put it down. If there's a warning may cause diarrhea, why? It's food. It's not supposed to do that. Like that's not.
It shouldn't do that. And also, they sneak into toothpaste also, because a lot of toothpaste are sweetened with xylitol, and some people, not everyone, but some people are sensitive to xylitol. Some people are also sensitive to fibers that are added to thicken the nut milk. So if you're trying to be good and you're being dairy free and you're buying a store made, a brand with guar gum, xanthan gum, which are fibers that for some people are good and they help them become regular, but other people it actually irritates the gut and causes diarrhea. So these are things to be aware of, because you might not be thinking like, oh, I went and I bought an unsweetened almond milk. It's supposed to be healthy for me. Yeah. Well, read the ingredients, because you're not just buying almond milk, you're buying almond milk with these other ingredients in it that might not agree with your gut.
Absolutely. And oh my gosh, we could talk for 3 more hours, but I know you have you have other obligations today, as do I. I want to also share with listeners before we get to the next piece. You have an incredible gift for people. I know that the website for the book is up, and it's GUTSMARTprotocol.com. And if you do GUTSMARTprotocol.com/gift, which will be in the show notes, you are giving listeners a free chapter, which is amazing.
Free chapter and a few little surprises in there, so they can get a sense of the book. Dr. Perlmutter wrote a foreword to the book, and it's included with the free chapter, along with part of my gut healing story that I talked about, and how my own gut health journey, and like I started in the beginning, how that inspired me to just pretty much dedicate my life to helping people with gut health issues.
Which is so amazing. And hopefully this conversation, just hearing some of these, this is why we have these conversations. Hopefully people will be motivated to take steps to start to address gut health or look there. And then the quiz and the book, incredible resources. And
to realize that you may not have gut symptoms, but if you have what we call gut-related health issues, which can be just metabolism and weight gain and inability to lose weight, no matter what you do, you just can't seem to drop the pounds. Well, then you've got to look at your gut, because it's probably leaky gut, inflammation, insulin resistance, and a foundational gut health issue that needs to be addressed for your body to be able to start losing weight.
And disagree if you will. I would say anybody listening to this, if you have autoimmunity, you have gut issues, whether you feel them or not. I think that we've kind of eliminated the question of whether
we didn't get in there, but famous researcher Alessio Fasano had done
he's incredible.
Study on what is the potential trigger for autoimmunity, like where does autoimmunity rise from?
Yep.
And part of the theory is that it comes from the gut, and it involves 3 things: an environmental trigger, a genetic predisposition, and leaky gut. And the environmental trigger that he was looking at was gluten, because gluten in some ways to our immune system looks like a bacteria, the protein. And so our immune system, when it sees the gluten protein, it thinks that it's a foreign invader and basically says attack. And then it starts destroying the gut lining and causing body-wide inflammation.
And his later research has shown, it's not just for people who are gluten sensitive, that gluten can create these issues at any point, and start to get those
I, th-
gut
I think
junctions
it's
to loosen up.
I think it's a cumulative hit
Yeah.
hypothesis,
Yep.
and some people might reach that threshold earlier because of genetic predisposition, and other people it may take a little bit longer in their lives, but
Sure.
eventually they do hit that threshold
Well, and
as
you
well.
mentioned toxins, and yeah, there's so many different things that play in, and it is a kind of a cumulative effect for sure.
Yeah.
This has been so incredible, and you already have given amazing advice for people, but I always throw my guests under the bus at the end and ask for one step that listeners can take starting today to begin to heal.
Wow.
I know it's
Yeah.
a tough one.
It makes me think of a study that they did in Cuba during what they call the special period, which is when Cuba lost its subsidies from Russia, and Cuba started rationing sugar. So per capita sugar consumption dropped significantly in Cuba. And they also take really close, population measurements of heart disease, diabetes, weight, heart attacks. And during this special period when they were rationing, they rationed and limited sugar quite a bit. All of those health issues, the rates of all of those health issues dropped dramatically. Like it wasn't just a little drop, it was a dramatic drop. And then you see the end of the special period, and then sugar consumption starts to increase again. And you see all of these health issues start to come back in
There's
higher
your
rates.
science.
So
your one step would be
to cut back on sugar intake, like cut back on all sources of sugar, whether it's obvious cane sugar, desserts, sweets, or adding sugar to coffee, to drinks, but also sweetened beverages, and also hidden sugars in refined carbohydrates and processed foods. If you can do that, you're going to be doing your gut microbiome a favor, because you're not going to be feeding those bad bugs. And I would say I'm very much believe, even though my 14-day program is obviously more complex and you're doing a bunch of things at once, but I also think of the importance of what I call stepwise activations, especially for people who get overwhelmed.
right.
Do one thing, conquer that well. So if it's sugar and you're going to cut back on your sugar, that will be your one goal. That's all you're doing, is cutting back on sugar. And once you have that down packed, then you go on to the next activation.
I love that.
That will ensure that you are successful in accomplishing your goals. Whatever it may be. It may be that you're learning to meditate, and that's all you're going to do, is you're going to activate meditation. But it's important to know yourself and know what type of person you are, and whether it's easier for you to do one thing at a time and conquer it before adding in the next thing, rather than trying to do so many things that then you just fail because it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Or you can do it for a week and then forget it. It's too hard. And I want to highlight that you said reduce sugar, be aware. I always tell people, start by noticing, because often if you haven't already been really paying attention, you're getting a lot more sugar than you think. But it's not about perfect. It's about consistently improving. And as you said, then build on the wins. So you mentioned sugar, and meditation was kind of an aside. I'll throw out on top of your one thing I asked you for, because you said it, and I just want to highlight it for listeners. The idea of where is your easiest place to start, because that's how you start to build the momentum. And so, maybe meditation, you're like, I can meditate. I've already played.
For some people, it's cut out bread when you go out to eat.
Right.
So you stop eating bread at the table. And that's the first step in reducing your grain and wheat consumption. Yes. And then little by little, you expand that and you stop having pasta and so it can be different for different people, like you said. Yeah. But recognizing those little wins, because it's much more encouraging to build upon the wins than try to do it all at once and fail. And then you just feel, all the guilt and the shame and all that comes up, which doesn't help us get to our health goals.
I love it. Amazing. And for people listening on the go that aren't going to check out the show notes, where's the best place to find you? Because I know they're going to want to hear more from you.
Certainly going to the book website, GUTSMARTprotocol.com, but you can find me on Instagram mainly as @Dr. Pedre, DRPEDRE. And I put out a lot of free resources and information.
Amazing content. People. Yeah, your feed is incredible.
And I try to do some funny things and do some funny reels and stuff to entertain and educate at the same time.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Pedre, thank you so much. You have given us amazing gold today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Go check out Dr. Pedre's book, The GUTSMART Protocol.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.